Good morning, everybody. I think I'm going to spend a minute and check in on my eBay account. Let's see what's going on over there. So I'm just going to log in here. Wait, what's this? What the? What? No. No. I got a negative feedback. So what happens when you get negative feedback? Are you just stuck with it? Well, of course not. In this video, actually, I'm going to show you 8 different scenarios where you're probably going to be able to get your negative feedback removed. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into scenario number 1. So let's talk about scenario number 1. This one is almost guaranteed. If this happens, you will be able to get your negative feedback removed. And what we were talking about is feedback extortion. This is when a buyer threatens you with negative feedback. So the typical scenario is like this. The buyer purchases an item from you for $100. Then they message you and say, yeah, I know I bought this for $100, but I only wanted to pay $95. Refund me the $5 difference or I'm going to leave you negative feedback. That is feedback extortion. If they do end up leaving you negative feedback, you will be able to get it removed by eBay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it's not considered extortion if they're threatening to do something that they're already allowed to do. So for instance, let's say they purchase an item from you and you message them and say, hey, for whatever reason, we're not going to be able to ship you this item. If they then message you back and say, well, too bad, I want the item, and if you don't ship it to me, I'm going to leave you negative feedback, that's not feedback extortion because they're only asking you to do what you were already supposed to do. So technically, that will not be able to be removed if they leave you negative feedback for that. Now, another thing I want you to keep in mind is that eBay can recognize when you're trying to provoke the buyer and get them to threaten you. So if you message them and say, well, what happens if I don't send you the item? Or what happens if the item does arrive late? And they say, well, then I'm going to leave you negative feedback. Then eBay, a lot of the representatives are trained to look out for that. So you don't want to manipulate the situation to try to get the buyer to actually leave you negative feedback on purpose. But otherwise, anytime a buyer starts to get angry with me and ends up threatening me, I almost rejoice because it means that if they do leave me negative feedback, it's almost guaranteed that I'm going to be able to get it removed. The second reason that eBay will always remove negative feedback is if it contains profanity. That is not allowed by eBay. And I believe they actually have bots that will scan feedback to make sure it doesn't contain profanity so that those feedback don't even get posted if they try to leave profanity in the feedback. But just in case it is, or they disguise the profanity by adding, like money signs to it or asterisks to hide the way it looks, even in those situations, you can call eBay up and get the profanity removed. Now, kind of related to 1 and 2, the first 2 scenarios I went over, what I've also noticed is that I've had situations where a buyer has become very angry at me, has started to curse at me and pretty much yell at me as much as you can yell at someone through messages and emails. They leave me negative feedback that was probably completely justified, but I've contacted eBay and said, this person was yelling at me, they were cursing at me, and I've had situations where I don't know if the rep just felt bad for me or they just felt like they don't want to tolerate that kind of language towards a seller. So I've actually had negative feedback removed for that reason, even though the feedback was completely justified and there's nothing wrong with it. Because they cursed at me in the messages, eBay removed them. That brings me to another point before we move forward. With all these scenarios, you're going to notice something when you call eBay. There are going to be some representatives that will remove feedback for pretty much any reason, and even reasons they're not supposed to. And you're going to have other representatives that won't remove any feedback, even when it's supposed to be removed. It's just an inconsistency in their training, and because there's representatives from all over the world, and I think that's part of the issue. So it really depends on the representative that you speak to. Now, with that in mind, one thing that's not allowed is something called representative shopping. And that's when you call eBay multiple times trying to find a representative that will remove your feedback for you. That's technically not allowed. I've never heard of anyone actually getting in trouble for it, but I just want to warn you that it's not something that eBay likes. The third scenario I want to cover is when a buyer leaves a negative feedback saying they never received the item, but you have a tracking number uploaded proving that it was delivered. In that situation, eBay will remove the negative feedback. Now, it's important that you actually upload the tracking numbers on time so that they're in the system, and when you call eBay, you can say, hey, this tracking number was uploaded, it shows it was delivered, but in the feedback, they're complaining that they never received it. eBay is going to remove that feedback. A similar situation is scenario number 4, which is when a buyer opens up an item not received case and it's decided in your favor. In that situation, if the buyer had left you negative feedback before, that negative feedback is supposed to automatically disappear as long as the case is decided in your favor. Now, in order to make sure that item not received cases are decided in your favor, you want to make sure that you upload your tracking numbers on time, and if a case is opened, that you also upload the tracking number to that case. So that's really important to do, and the best way to do this, to pretty much automate this, is using a software called TRACKERBOT. TRACKERBOT's great because what it does is it connects your Gmail account basically to your eBay account. So anytime you get an email from your supplier like Walmart, Home Depot, it's going to contain a tracking number. eBay TRACKERBOT will then pull that tracking number and upload it to eBay for you. So as your store grows, you get more sales every day. This whole process of uploading tracking numbers is automatic. You don't even have to think about it because it runs in the background. The other great thing about TRACKERBOT is that you can set up messages so that when items are shipped out, the buyer is going to get a message that says, hey, if there are any issues with your order, make sure to contact us before you leave us negative feedback. That way we can take care of it, and we promise we're going to make it right. This is kind of like an ounce of prevention, right? The best scenario here is not to get the negative feedback in the first place. TRACKERBOT helps with that because it gets the tracking numbers to the buyers and it sends out those messages, so hopefully they message you before they leave you negative feedback. So if you are interested in checking out TRACKERBOT, I do have an affiliate link, so you can click on that if you're interested in it. That will be probably the third link in the description of this video. Scenario number 5 is when the buyer leaves a negative feedback, but the comment they leave is a positive one. Usually this means the buyer made a mistake. They meant to leave you positive feedback and accidentally left you negative feedback. What do you do in this situation? Well, what I usually do is I try reaching out to the buyer first and say, hey, did you mean to leave me negative feedback? And usually they say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. No, I didn't. Then I just send them a revision request and they revise it to a positive feedback instead. If I reach out to the buyer and they don't respond, or I reach out and they say, oh my gosh, I made a mistake, but then I send them the revision request and they never revise it, at that point I contact eBay. Depending on the representative, usually I can find one that will remove it for that reason because it's pretty clear that it was not supposed to be a negative feedback. But usually most of the representatives want you to first try to resolve it with the buyer directly before calling them and getting them involved. Scenario number 6 is when the item was shipped through eBay's global shipping program and arrived at the buyer's location damaged, due to eBay's fault. So with eBay's global shipping program, you're only responsible for getting the item delivered safely to eBay's headquarters, or eBay's global shipping program headquarters in Erlanger, Kentucky. Once the item arrives safely there, you're completely off the hook. So if the item gets damaged somewhere between Kentucky and the buyer's address, that's on eBay. So if a buyer leaves you negative feedback for that, just call up eBay, explain what happened, explain it arrived safely in Kentucky, and then somehow it got damaged after that, and eBay should remove the feedback for that reason. Scenario number 7 is when the buyer complains about the price. So annoying, because they had every opportunity beforehand to shop around, try other websites, see if it's cheaper on other websites, see if they could even find it cheaper on eBay. So if a buyer complains about that, usually you can get it removed as well. I had this really annoying customer a couple months ago. They bought an item from me about 3 times. At that time, it was about $33. Then they buy it from me again after the price went up to $40. There was nothing I could do about it because it had gone up on my supplier's website, so I had to raise the price as well. So it went up to $40, they bought it at $40, then left me negative feedback for every single one of the orders they had purchased. So that was a total of 4 orders, saying, a great product, I just wish he hadn't raised the price to $40. So completely absurd. I contacted the buyer, they didn't respond to me, and I contacted eBay. They agreed that it was absurd, that the buyer had every opportunity to shop around, and they shouldn't also be leaving feedback for one order on a different order. So that's kind of a bonus here. If the buyer leaves you feedback for one item on a different purchase, so to speak, they'll remove it for that reason. So in this case, they removed all 4 of the negative feedback so that none of those hit my account. So if the buyer complains about the price, yeah, you can probably get it removed for that reason. And scenario number 8, when eBay will remove negative feedback for you, is a little bit of a tricky one, but this is when a buyer mentions another website or another retailer inside the negative feedback. So if the comment says, I bought this item for $40 and it was only $35 on Walmart, that is a scenario when the eBay representatives will probably remove the comment, but not the negative feedback itself. So in other words, you'll still get a negative feedback, but the comment itself will be gone. Not an ideal situation because you want it all removed. In the past, they used to remove everything. Now, most of the representatives won't do that. Some representatives, though, will. So it's, again, you don't want to do representative shopping, but some of them will remove it. That's all I'm going to say about it. And I'll also say with any of these, if there's situations where the representatives won't remove the feedback for you, or you receive negative feedback and it doesn't fit into one of these 8 scenarios, you can still work it out with the buyer. And that's kind of another bonus one for you here. Contact the buyer, ask them what happened, tell them you're sorry and you want to make this right. Ask them what you can do to make it right. One thing you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to say to the buyer, hey, if I just refund you the money, will you remove the negative feedback? You're not allowed to do that. But what you can do is say, hey, if I just refund you for the price of the item, will that make this right for you? I want to make this right for you. Once everything's resolved, once you refund them, then you can reach out and say, hey, are you satisfied with this purchase now, with this whole transaction? And if you are, I would really appreciate it if you would revise the feedback. This works really, really well if you provide outstanding customer service. So just treat your customers right from the beginning. It will reduce the number of negative feedback you get. And even after you get the negative feedback, it's okay to reach out to them and try to get it removed. If you want to learn more about eBay and eBay dropshipping, then I have a free webinar that I'm going to be hosting soon That will be the first link in the description of this video if you want to sign up for the webinar. It's going to teach you exactly how to get started with eBay dropshipping and the one really simple skill that you need to get started. I think it's going to surprise you how simple that skill is. So if you are interested in checking out that webinar for free, click on the first link in the description of this video. Look guys, we covered 8 different scenarios in this video about how you can get negative feedback removed. I'm sure I missed some, so if I did, leave a comment underneath this video letting me know about other ways that you know of to get negative feedback removed. I would love to hear from you guys. I learn so much from the comment sections of these videos, and I answer all the questions and all the comments personally. So if you guys like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you loved it, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video or during the webinar.